Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail, and may not be suitable for children under 13. Listener discretion is advised.
In this episode of Unsung Murder Ballads, we want to add an additional trigger warning to all our listeners. This episode does discuss the sexual assault of minors, as well as crimes committed by members of the Catholic Church, and we realize that may be sensitive for some of our listeners. So just an additional kind of heads up and trigger warning, this is going to discuss some very brutal topics. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the Catherine Cesnik case. Just as a recap for last week, we discussed the disappearance and murder of Catherine Cesnik, as well as the murder of Joyce Malecki. We also discussed that Father Maskell abused many of the students and even brought one student named Jean to the body of Sister Catherine. So we're picking up pretty much where we left off, except we're now jumping a little bit in time because Catherine's case had gone cold for so long. So here we are, jumping back in. One day in 1990, while Maskell was at the Holy Cross Church, something bizarre happened. Maskell told a cemetery caretaker, a man named William Story, to get a front loader and dig a hole 10 feet by 20 feet in the abandoned rear part of the cemetery on the grounds of the church he was working at. Maskell then brought in a pickup truck filled with boxes that were wrapped in plastic. Maskell put those boxes into the hole and went to go get more. Mr. Story, curious and obviously not an idiot, went and looked inside some of the boxes. Maskell returned, put more boxes into the hole, and told Story to cover it all up and put grass on top of it. Mr. Story would be fired by Maskell a couple months later. In 1992, Jean had a random encounter, and obviously these boxes are going to come into play in a little bit. I'm leaving you in suspense. In 1992, Jean had a random encounter with another former student from Keogh that asked her if she was going to go to the reunion. And Jean declined, but couldn't remember why the topic of going back to that school made her feel so uncomfortable. And she went home and she prayed and she meditated on what was bothering her, and the memories began to come back. As an adult,
That's what did it, really?
isn't that weird? Something as
That's
silly
what
as
did
that.
it? Like, I was waiting for a more traumatic something.
No,
That's crazy.
she literally sat there and kept asking herself, why does thinking about going back to the school make me feel the way I'm feeling? And she just sat down and meditated on it. And it didn't all come back at once. It was like piecemeal, but but that was the initial trigger. Like she knew instinctively that something made her feel that uncomfortable, and she just started meditating on it. And she would say in this documentary that she couldn't do it with anyone else in the room. She had to be alone, and she would just sit there for hours. Yeah, so as an adult, Jean was struggling to come to terms with what she had gone through, and why she never told anybody. Jean had spoke with her pastor over the course of days about what she was remembering, what had happened about both with Magnus and with Maskell. Now, Maskell at this point had moved from Keogh after some parents complained about him, and a new principal that had come in demanded that he leave. He was moved to the Archdiocese Division of Schools from 1975 until 1980. It is unclear exactly what Maskell was actually doing for those years. He's sort of off the radar.
Classic, just moving him around.
Yep. In 1980 until 1982, Maskell was moved to the Church of the Annunciation and then moved to the Holy Cross Church in downtown Baltimore. Now, the pastor Jean was speaking to suggested that she meet with the head of the archdiocese, a person by the name of Rick Woy, W-O-Y. I'm not saying it with a weird accent. It's Woy. Woy claimed that this was the first time anyone had ever voiced a concern about Maskell, but that he believed Jean. Woy told Jean that he wanted to build a case against Maskell, and that because Maskell was so smart, they needed to move slowly and carefully.
Makes sense.
At a second meeting with Woy, Jean was surprised to find him sitting there with the archdiocese lawyer, Kathy Hoskins. Hoskins suggested to Jean that she get herself a lawyer in case Maskell tried to sue her for the things that she was saying.
Ugh, terrible that you shouldn't even have to worry about that.
Exactly. After getting a lawyer and that the church was helping her pay for, they asked her to write a formal statement to help remove Maskell from the church. Woy and Hoskins had Jean read her statement, which included some graphic details of what Maskell had done to her, and then they asked Jean to point out another girl that went to the school that could corroborate her story. Jean didn't know anyone else that could back her up, nor would she want to make someone else relive it, even if she did.
Right.
Jean offered more names of abusers, i.e., Brother Bob, etc., but Hoskins and Woy didn't want that. Her own lawyer even berated her for wasting their time with something they
God, that's
can't
awful.
with something they can't do anything with. So Jean's husband fired him. Jean and her husband then went and hired their own lawyers. After the allegations Jean brought forward, Maskell was told he had to go to a hospital called the Institute of Living in Connecticut.
Oh.
This was a place the archdiocese sent clergy to initially to help priests that were suffering from depression and things like that. Obviously, a depressed priest isn't very useful to the community.
Yeah.
A psychologist that worked there stated that one day, while sitting down with a priest he believed was depressed, he was told by that priest that he had sex with a 14-year-old. And when the priest told the bishop sent him to that institute.
Jesus.
That priest allegedly stated that the bishop was afraid that particular priest would be arrested and then it would be on the news. So that priest had to be sent to this institute. The institute realized that this very thing was happening too often and finally told the church that they would no longer accept their priests as patients if they were not told the full extent of why they were there and receive their entire file.
Very extremely reasonable.
Yes, it is. But the church never sent another priest to them again.
Oh wow.
Right?
They said nope, not even gonna risk it.
It just
That's
blows
awful.
my mind. Back in 1992, while Maskell is there, Jean is trying to find a corroborating witness and speak with a woman that she knew at Keogh. They go through the yearbook, and the woman points to a photo of Sister Catherine and asks Jean if she remembers her. Jean stated that it was like she was in a fog, and initially she didn't remember Sister Catherine. It wasn't until later, as she's driving home, that she started to think that she really loved Catherine Cesnik, and she knew she was important to her, but she didn't know why.
This is crazy. The memory is so interesting.
Yeah, like the layers of protectiveness that goes into this blows my mind. And this, by the way, the documentary, The Keepers, it is a 7-episode series on Netflix that is so good. I recommend it. Most of this, what I'm reading, came out of that.
Now I want to know what sets her off and makes her remember what makes her so important to her.
Well, we're about to get into that.
All right, let's do it.
So Jean calls her family together for a meeting where the family would discuss what had happened regarding her uncle's abuse when they were all children. But Jean is struggling with everything that's going on, and she leaves the meeting. Jean stated that Sister Catherine kept coming up in her thoughts, and she started thinking that she was responsible for Catherine's death. So she's in the other room, and her sister comes in to check on her, and Jean turns to her and says, "I think I killed Sister Catherine." And then her sister, yeah, and then her sister brings her back to the meeting and announces to everyone that this meeting is going to change direction. And her sister informs them, the entire family, of what had been going on for the past few months with Jean recovering her memories. And her family comes out in full support of Jean. And they begin to help her research everything and try to piece it all together.
Oh.
So Yeah,
I mean, great to see that she's being immediately believed and helped.
which is good because that doesn't happen often enough.
Mm-hmm.
Once the memory of how Maskell had brought Jean to see the body of Sister Catherine was fully recalled, Jean went to the police and she told them what she knew, even the maggots being on her face.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the police didn't believe her because it's winter and there are no maggots in the winter.
I mean, it's
Police work
reasonable
at
for
its
them to think
finest.
that.
I mean, I can see, yeah, I can. It's a reasonable thought. It is winter, but at the same time, get up off your fucking desk and do something. So in 1993, a newspaper called The Sun ran the story that the police were looking back into Catherine's murder. It was also the first time it was suggested that Maskell might have been involved in the murder of Sister Catherine. It's also the first time that some of the students at Keogh learned that these terrible things had happened at their school. It's in early 93 that Maskell is also released from that institute and sent to St. Augustine Church in Baltimore.
God, they send him back to the same city.
The same city.
Come on.
Yeah, it's almost like they just don't give a shit.
Right. It's like they don't even really try to cover it up, but they care so little.
It's crazy. Yeah, I agree. It's crazy. Send him, like, if they had sent him to Boston, then no one would know the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he could just start a whole new vicious cycle.
Well, they're letting that happen.
True, they're letting that happen anyway.
But if you're sending him if you were to send him to Boston, then there would be no information, and then he can just start from scratch.
Correct. And if you remember what happened in Boston with the spotlight, we in Boston and the newspapers in Boston broke the story of sexual abuses by priests in the mid 90s. So that, I mean, I joke when I said Boston because it was sort of close to Baltimore, but this was breaking elsewhere anyway. So this is a bad time for the Catholic Church. So the newspaper tried to interview Maskell, but he, of course, denied everything, claiming that it was, quote, hysterical nonsense, unquote.
Oh, God.
This makes me think of the hysterical pregnancy from the Tudors episode.
Yeah.
Jean and her family were so shocked that the church would allow Maskell to just be out in public with no consequences that they took action. If they needed corroboration, then they would find some. Jean's sister went to the convent that had overseen the Keogh school and asked for a list of alumni so they could organize a reunion, she said. The nun she spoke with said that she could have access to the list, but it would cost her $10.
What the hell? Come on.
Right? At least it's only 10. Once her sister had the list, they got to work. They created these postcard style things that basically said, if you went to the school between these years and had any experiences you thought were inappropriate, call this number. And it was Jean's lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
They hand wrote and sent out close to 1,000 of these little postcard sized letters.
Whoa.
Can you imagine? Like this, I mean, picturing 10 siblings just sitting there at a table or whatever they were doing, just writing these things out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, former Keogh student Teresa, she received one of those letters. Teresa had graduated and was married and having children at 18 and 19 years old, feeling that she had been forced to put all her dreams on hold. So Teresa called the number from a payphone because she was afraid to call from her own house.
Wow.
So she was hesitant to speak directly at first, but she eventually told Jean's lawyer that she had a lot to tell them about Maskell.
Oof.
Jean's family had been kind of unsure about how many responses they were going to get, but they were shocked at the overwhelming response they received. 40 to 50 people contacted Jean's lawyer, and it took over a year to do all the interviews for every witness that responded.
Whoa. This was widespread. That's crazy.
All of the people were talking about Father Maskell.
It's good that they came out, though. I mean, the more people that corroborate stuff, the stronger this case is.
Mm-hmm.
You would think.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
The lawyers quickly learned from the interviews that Maskell would perform pelvic examinations on the girls in his office,
God,
that,
disgusting.
that the police, other clergy, local business owners, and politicians all took part in raping the girls.
Awful.
In 1994, Jean and Teresa would both agree to a lawsuit against Maskell. The gynecologist named Christian Richter, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and the School Sisters of Notre Dame, since the DA's office didn't want to press charges without some kind of evidence. So instead of going for like the legal part, they went for a lawsuit. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
A police officer that insisted on anonymity due to a very real fear of consequences spoke with the filmmakers of the documentary The Keepers. He stated that in 94, over 100 women came forward with credible complaints against Maskell.
That is just so many children. I mean, yeah, it makes sense that like everyone had to know what was going on at that school. It was so many of them.
Yeah, the fact that there are some that said, I didn't know any of this. That blows my mind that they were so in the dark of it. But then it also shows how afraid all the rest of the girls were.
Yeah.
This police officer said that Assistant District Attorney Sharon May, not only did she not listen to any of it, she actually shielded the church. Now, May was also the head of the Sex Crimes Division. And here she is not taking any action, but actively protecting the church.
That's insane. Awful.
So also in 1994, Mr. Story, the cemetery caretaker that Maskell had buried all the boxes and then fired, he came forward after seeing the reports alleging Maskell's involvement in Sister Catherine's murder and spoke with a detective. He told the detective that he didn't know the full extent of what was in the boxes, but he knew where they were buried. Mr. Story brought the police to where Maskell had him dig the hole, and they proceeded to dig up the boxes. The news reported on the dig, but Sharon May was in charge of the excavation and declined to answer any media questions. Now, this unidentified police officer, he reports that some of the boxes contained files on the girls, like profiles, like the police files.
Oh, God. Like he was making and keeping them?
Correct. And they had photos of naked girls that were clearly of high school age.
Oh, gross.
Sharon May would say that she'd look into getting a warrant to arrest Maskell, but never took any action. May claims that what they found in the ground had been wet and had to be dried out, but to her recollection, nothing of value that could be used against Maskell was in there.
Fucking doubt it. It smells like bullshit to me.
I 100% agree. So at trial, Jean and Teresa, who were known as Jane Doe and Jane Roe, were being beaten down by the lawyers of the church during deposition because they were brutal in their attempts to make the women feel uncomfortable in retelling their abuses.
That's got to be like, where the hell are your ethics as a lawyer? Like, I understand someone has to represent I guess it's money. I guess money buys everyone, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. But so something I don't really go into here, but they went into in the documentary, is around this time, repressed memories. There were a couple moments where there were a few trials, a few cases where women had come forward with repressed memories, and it turned out that these repressed memories that they were having were actually fake, that they were things that they had seen in movies or things that had been kind of implanted in their minds during hypnosis. And
True, that can happen.
So the courts at this point weren't buying the repressed memory thing. That was a big moment.
And they can just further discredit their thoughts and memories and what's coming back to them due to that.
Correct. And that's exactly what they're doing here. That's why they're so brutal to these two women. So in 95, the courts were trying to determine if recovered memories were accepted to overcome the statute of limitations for the rape cases that happened over 20 years prior. During the preliminary trial, the lawyers continued to attempt to intimidate Jean and Teresa but they had reached the point where even discussing and revealing the intimate details no longer made them feel ashamed. And that gave them a degree of strength. They literally just they were like, fuck it, we got to tell you this. We're just going to look you in the face and tell you this.
Yep.
And so they no longer had that power over the women. The judge determined that the case did not meet the criteria for waiving the statute of limitations, which by the way, in Maryland was only 3 years.
Holy crud, that's short?
No, I'm not. And so once I heard that, I started doing my own little research. So let's take a little look at the average statute of limitation on sexual assault. In the US, that average is 21 years. Some states have only 10 years. Now, here's an interesting little thing. Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming, and Maryland, after it was far too late for the victims of Maskell, have since eliminated the statute of limitations on felony sexual assaults.
Amen. Preach. That is as it should be.
Right, but only 7 states, and amazingly, most of them being southern states.
Yeah, that's crazy. But
I honestly thought Massachusetts would be on that list, but it's not. But yeah,
what's Massachusetts statute?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but basically most of them are 10 years or 21 years. Like those are the 2 big ones. Yeah, that's it for rape. So
awful.
Obviously, Jean and Teresa were devastated. Now, Jean's husband, Mike, unfortunately died of esophageal cancer in 2007. And Jean, basically, she was afraid because she lost someone that had always been there by her side through everything that she was reliving. One good thing is Father Maskell died in 2001.
Yay.
He was, it was reported that he was really just sort of just fucked up in the head at the very end and kind of not really all there. So we can take some solace in that, I suppose. But now we're going to take some time to discuss suspects in Sister Catherine's and Joyce Malecki's disappearance.
All right. So we already know the answer, right?
We know that Maskell knew, but we don't know who Brother Bob is.
True.
But we're going to discuss quite a bit here. And there's some interesting things here that are kind of odd. So the first suspect police looked into was Gerald Koob, the priest that had deep romantic feelings for Catherine. Police were immediately suspicious of Koob, with one police officer stating that if he didn't kill her, then he knows who did.
Jesus Christ.
Koob did spend many hours at Catherine's apartment with the other priest, McKeon, and Sister Russell, Catherine's friend and roommate. Why they took so long to call the police and why they decided to take a walk and find her car has always sort of been a little weird. Koob had recently been rejected by Catherine. Koob has stated that he provided the movie ticket stubs from the film he saw with McKeon and reiterated that he had driven to Catherine's apartment with him directly from Annapolis, which was 30 miles away. However, McKeon's statement to police is that he had driven from the town of Beltsville 26 miles away in a different direction. Both McKeon and Koob were given polygraph tests that showed no signs of deception, but again, we all know how polygraph tests are.
Yep.
When asked about his relationship with Catherine, Koob said that it was affectionately platonic. Police did find a letter written to Koob from Catherine that was dated a few days before her disappearance in his home. In this letter, Catherine says that she is moody because her period finally arrived 10 days late. Kind of odd for a nun to be writing that, wouldn't you agree?
Yep, I would agree.
She also says that she had to wait on him because his schedule was so erratic. And she says that she wants to have him within her and that she wants to have his children and that she loves him.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound platonic.
After the discovery of this letter, Koob does admit that they had a sexual relationship.
There it is.
So Koob stated years later, obviously, that he knew nothing about the abuses at the school and that if he had, he would have steered investigators that way when Catherine disappeared. Koob also claimed that after lengthy interrogations and him pointing out that they were wasting their time with him when the real killer was still out there, that the police officer left the room. When that police officer returned, he had something wrapped in a newspaper and put it in front of Koob. Koob claimed that it was Catherine's severed, separated, and I'm not sure what the best term would be, but it was her vagina.
Her vulva. Yeah.
Yeah. Just wrapped like a cutlet and
Oh
brought
my God.
into the
What the
interrogation room.
fuck?
Now, the police obviously and vehemently deny this. They're
Of course.
like, every cop's like, there's no way they would do something like that.
Huh.
So if it's true, then what the fuck with the police? But if it's not true, then what the fuck with Koob? It's really
Yeah.
fucked up.
That's awful.
So the next day, the church lawyers go up to the upper level of the police department, and the investigators were told to back off of Koob. And that was it. They weren't allowed to look into him anymore.
Wow.
Just like that, they just gave up on him.
Church lawyers went up and said, hey, leave our priest alone.
And I would have said, no, screw you. We have due diligence to do here.
Well, maybe you should have been a police officer back in Baltimore in the 60s, man. So I don't necessarily think this next person is a suspect, but it's a person of interest at least. And that's Sister Russell.
Huh.
When Catherine's family went to her apartment after her body had been found, they asked Russell to help them gather Catherine's belongings. Russell kept saying that she couldn't help them.
Huh.
She seemed completely out of sorts to the point of non-communicative. Many of those that knew Russell described her as shy and hard to read, but not quite that bad. In 1970, another nun moved in with Russell and stated that Russell never talked about Catherine. It's generally believed that Catherine knew more than she ever told anyone, and especially about Catherine and the abuses. Investigators thought that it was odd that Russell called 2 priests instead of the police after Catherine didn't come home.
Yeah, that's
Weird.
sus for sure.
Koob claimed that Russell didn't tell him about how Maskell and Magnus had arrived the day before Catherine went missing when that student was there. He doesn't understand why she didn't tell anybody that happened.
Yeah.
Now, Russell eventually left the convent. She got married and had children. But did she cover things up? Was she being intimidated? We don't know.
Right.
When Maskell died, Russell is quoted having said to people, he went to the grave with his secrets. So we have no idea what she knows. And we'll never know because Russell died of cancer in the late 90s without ever revealing anything. So there's also Brother Bob. We don't know anything about Brother Bob except what Jean remembers. And aside from that, all she really remembered was that he had a birthmark or a mole on his side and a scar on his abdomen. That's all we know about Brother Bob. Now, here's where things get really interesting. There's a man named Ed Davidson. We're going to be talking about him, and he hasn't come up yet. So in 2013, 2 other former students from Keogh High School, Gemma and Abby, started a Facebook page called Justice for Catherine Cesnik and Joyce Malecki, and other alumni from the school began speaking out about their experiences. One day, a woman named Debbie Yon contacted Gemma and Abby through the Facebook page and says that her uncle killed Sister Catherine.
Whoa.
Debbie stated that her mother, one night after having a little too much to drink, told her that her uncle Ed did something and it involved a trunk and bloody clothes.
What a thing to let out.
Right, when she asked her mother what that was about the next day, her mother was sober and her mother looked panicked but said that she had never said any of that. Now, Debbie dropped it with her and didn't think about it again for years. She then connected on Facebook with her Uncle Ed's first wife, and she was able to hear from her aunt, like her aunt's version of what happened the night Sister Catherine went missing. Her aunt tells her of how she found out that her uncle Ed was in serious debt, and when she went to leave him, he choked her and told her that he could kill her and forget that he ever did it.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Wow.
It turns out,
Yes.
unfortunately, that this woman's aunt was pregnant with twins and didn't know it. So even though she tried to leave Ed, she ends up going back with Ed.
Oh, that's so tragic. Oh.
So the day Sister Catherine went missing, Ed had come home early from work and there was blood on his shirt. Ed had made up a pretty lame excuse as to why there was blood there, and that was that. He wouldn't talk about it. Days later, while watching the news, the report about Sister Catherine came on, and Debbie's aunt was starting to put the pieces together about the blood and the date that she had gone missing. And Ed says to her, they aren't going to find her body until the wintertime. So she was shocked.
Ugh.
So she was shocked and wondering if her husband could have been involved. Soon after, Ed suddenly has money that he didn't have before, and he was buying new tires for their car. And she then starts to think and wonder if the reason he's getting new tires is because maybe there were tire tracks left where at the crime scene kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Debbie's aunt did eventually leave Ed in 1970, and the following year she gets a call from Ed, and he's telling her that he's driving around in a stolen car from someplace in Tosin. A couple days later, she learns that a man fitting Ed's description had been driving around in a stolen car trying to entice young girls into his car.
Yikes.
The middle school
Ooh.
where he was attempting to pick up young girls was adjacent to Sister Catherine's apartment.
Oh.
What a sick man. Holy crap.
Disgusting. Yeah, that's horrible.
So she calls the police, and this leads to Ed's arrest. Now, Debbie's aunt also told her that the Christmas after Sister Catherine disappeared, Ed had given her a necklace as a gift. She was suspicious of the gift because he never gave her gifts like that. They couldn't afford such a thing. And she stated that if he were ever, if he were to buy her jewelry, it would usually involve her birthstone. But what he gave her was a green stone inside a wedding bell.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Huh? So keep in mind the missing gift for Sister Catherine's sister.
That was the first thing I thought about.
Yeah, her sister had just gotten engaged, and
That was-
Catherine was going out to buy a gift, a piece of jewelry. So a wedding bell with a stone in it would make sense.
That would make sense for that. Yeah.
Oh God, and it fits MOs too with trophies and giving them to other people. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Debbie's aunt gave Debbie the necklace, and both she and her husband stated in the documentary The Keepers that they wanted to give it to the person it was intended for if she were still alive. And the documentary The Keepers did locate and interview Ed in 2015. So this uncle that did all this, they were able to find him.
Huh.
In the documentary, Ed appears, he's old, and he just appears broken and extremely anxious. And he denies everything, obviously.
Yeah, naturally.
When asked if he drove a car, when asked that when he drove a car, if he used both his feet or just one foot, like most people do. Ed initially asked why, but then indicated that he did drive with 2 feet. So if you go back to that, the mud being on the brake, but not the gas pedal. Yep.
Oh, true.
Yep.
So Ed, of course, denies involvement. Now, Gemma and Abby had tried reaching out to Catherine's family at this point because now we're talking about this necklace. But initially, Catherine's family did not want to engage with anybody due to the immense pain that they felt going through everything that they had gone through.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't really touch on this again, but at the end of the documentary, they do reach and connect with Catherine's sister, Marilyn, who was the one that was getting married. And they do talk about the stone, and they talk about how it's most like the necklace and how that was most likely the kind of thing Catherine would have done. But unfortunately, because the gift was kind of last minute and was supposed to be a surprise, no one knows exactly what it was or should have been.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So that was Ed. Now we're going to talk about Bill Schmidt, another name we have not heard until now. So Abby, one of the two women with the Facebook page, set up an anonymous tip line, hoping that someone might come forward with any information about Sister Catherine. That tip line brought in a call from a neighbor of Catherine's, Sharon Schmidt, who felt that her uncle might have been involved. So the fact that there's two people who think their uncles killed her is just crazy to me.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
So Sharon remembered a night where her parents, Barbara and Ron, were having this intense fight, and her father said, "Do you know why I drink? Because we killed a woman and put her behind the shop."
What a thing to overhear.
Right?
Wow.
So she stated that she believes her mother thought that her uncle Bill had something to do with Catherine's murder, and maybe her father also.
Yeah, good reason.
Her uncle Bill lived in the same building as Sister Catherine, literally 10 steps from her door.
Ooh.
Sharon's mother, Barbara, stated that before the murder, her husband didn't drink, but suddenly he started drinking all the time. And she believed that that was a coping mechanism after the murder. She believes that Bill called Sharon's father to help him after he had killed Catherine. Now, Sister Catherine's body had been found close to the Schmidt family home and essentially behind their family business. And Bill would have known this area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a side note, because when this initially came up in my research, I didn't think it was important, but I think it does become important. So I have to add this as a side note. Bill was gay and close to a guy that everyone called Skippy. And it was believed that Skippy was Bill's lover.
Interesting.
Okay. So one night, Barbara's husband, Bill, came home late with blood on his clothes and his hands. And she asked him repeatedly where he had been, and he kept saying, "Don't worry about it." But she did not relent, and he claimed to have been in a bar fight. But Barbara knew that it was obviously that wasn't true. Yeah, you just went into mute again.
It's because I sneezed.
Oh, okay. I thought you were about to start yelling about something. I was like, we just lost you.
Oh no,
That's what she's secretly doing when she mutes. She's just letting all the rage
Raging.
and all the hatred out.
Yeah, just screaming at my computer.
Her roommates are hovering in the corner, scared.
Yeah.
She stated that, and I love this because this woman, Barbara, in the documentary, she kept saying the phrase "after the nun died," which I thought was really weird.
That is a really cold way to talk about it.
Yes. But she stated that after the nun died, as she put it, that her husband started drinking, doing drugs, and getting into fights, but not before that. So Barbara also stated that afterwards, Bill became a hermit and didn't like to go to work.
Oh, he's dealing with
this. Now, this is Bill, who is the uncle, not the father.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara also claimed that Bill began talking about a woman in the attic, and
That's
he would
fucking weird.
He could not stop talking about Sister Catherine's death and the circumstances surrounding it. Barbara stated that one night a man dressed as a nun followed her in her car, trying to intimidate her.
What the fuck?
Yeah. She believes that this man was Skippy.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Bill got so deep into whatever was eating at him that he had to move back home with his parents and started to drink, take pills, and stay up all hours talking about the woman in the attic.
Jesus, he's fucking unwell.
To prove to him that there was no woman in the attic, Barbara went to the attic where he was living, and in the attic, she found a mannequin wearing a nun's habit.
Ooh.
Bill claimed that she was after him.
Ooh, I hate it.
Yeah. It's even creepier in the documentary because they have like the reenactment. It's just the creepy looking.
Ew.
So within months of Catherine's death, Bill attempted suicide numerous times and eventually succeeded.
Ugh.
An investigator working with Gemma and Abby called Sharon's brother Brian, and he gave an interview. He claimed that he was with his Uncle Bill at Bill's apartment and was told to wait there while Bill had gone to Sister Catherine's apartment. After waiting a while, he went outside to see his uncle, and his uncle was with that man named Skippy. Later, Sharon's brother saw Bill and Skippy carrying a rolled carpet out of Catherine's apartment, telling him that they had to load it into the car and they'd be right back. Brian then claimed that they got Sharon's father and that they gave him a .22 caliber pistol, and they all drove to the Schmidt family home. He said that Sharon's father kept him occupied by firing the gun. They were all out, just shooting to one side of the house into the woods, and that Bill and Skippy were unloading the truck and going in the other direction into the woods. Bill threatened Brian with violence and death if he ever told anyone what he saw. And Brian died of a heart attack 6 months after giving the interview to the people in the Keepers. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
When he gave that interview, he died 6 months later. Yeah.
Oof.
It's interesting because we immediately think Maskell did it, but Maskell's a priest and the chaplain to police and military, so he doesn't have to do it.
He doesn't know, and it's probably better if he's like, yeah, I'll get a pro.
Yeah, and think about that. Like, he's manipulating women for his own pleasure, but he's probably still manipulating boys and men. So it's entirely possible that he has these guys doing his bidding for them.
Oh, yeah.
We got a Manson situation going on here.
Sort of, yeah. And I honestly, because, in the documentary they talk, well, which one might be? I think both of them might be true. There's no reason to believe that Skippy isn't Ed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or there are more people involved. Who knows? It just blows my mind that we have all this and yet we have no answers.
Yeah.
So I do want to take a moment to revisit Joyce Malecki, because I feel bad that this young woman is so overshadowed by everything else. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to talk.
What she went through was horrific.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about her here. So Joyce and her siblings went to a school that passed Maskell's rectory where he lived. A man by the name of Charles Franz had come forward years after and discussed his abuse at the hands of Maskell while Maskell lived at that rectory. Franz stated that after the abuse and threats from Maskell for him to be silent, that his mother went to the archdiocese and made them very aware of what Maskell was doing in 1967. So according to Franz, the archdiocese knew that Maskell was a pedophile in 1967. The Maleckis lived 2 blocks away from the rectory. Joyce went to Mass and did confession at the church where Maskell was. Her brother has stated that they knew where he lived. They knew he lived there, and they felt honored to be Catholic and live so close to a priest.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Joyce's brother her brothers have stated that Maskell even sent their family a sympathy card after Joyce's funeral.
Oh.
But the police and FBI have always claimed that they could find no connection between Catherine's case and Joyce's case. Joyce's body had been found on the grounds of a military installation, so the FBI had jurisdiction there. However, when the FBI determined that her death had nothing to do with the military or the government, they handed the case off to local police. The local police claimed the FBI never handed them anything. So essentially, no one was investigating Joyce Malecki's death.
Awful.
Yep. So the fingerprint that police had found in Joyce's car were never run through the database.
Are you kidding me?
The forensics evidence they found under her fingernails was never tested for DNA.
Oh, come on.
And when her family asked why not, they were told, quote, 2 reasons, budget and manpower.
Insane. Like that's the most important thing you could do.
Yeah, it is so fucked up.
That makes my blood boil.
It's hugely upsetting.
Fucking awful.
And the sad part is maybe they we're trying to look into it, and then Sister Catherine's case maybe overshadowed it all. But it's so fucked up because we have no idea.
Even if that was the reason, that's still bullshit.
Agreed. At least put one person on it.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, if the FBI never said, never actually handed it off to local police like they claim, then the local police are thinking the FBI is doing it.
Right.
Yeah, but you can just play he said, she said to each cover your asses, and then everybody's so confused that there's no straight answer. So you just move forward.
Correct.
Or they think you're just going to drop it or something.
Right. And to this day, we have no answers for Joyce Malecki.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I feel, I mean, even the rest of it is tragic. Don't get me wrong. But I really feel that Joyce Malecki deserved better than she got.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss some further cover-ups. So Abby and Gemma began trying to find any court documents, police records, and the like to see what the government had done regarding Maskell. They could get nothing. There's a whole sequence in the documentary where they're showing the two of them waiting for, Freedom of Information Acts and things like that. They're waiting for releases, and they never get anything. It's literally postponement after postponement after postponement after postponement. They never get anything. So that's hugely frustrating because we're supposed to have access to this stuff.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Some of the records had supposedly been damaged in floods and fires, some lost. This suggests heavily that there's a huge cover-up, most likely at the request of the church, because they do have a lot of power here. The Baltimore Sun reported that in late 2016, that since 2011, the Archdiocese had paid out settlements to some of Maskell's alleged victims. So at this point, under the radar, the church is paying off the people making these complaints.
Fucking messed up.
In 2016, the Baltimore County Police Department reassigned the case, prompting new interviews and further investigations into alleged sexual abuse at Keogh. The police claims they have a DNA profile from at least one cigarette butt found at the site of Catherine's body. After obtaining permission from the state's attorney's office, the Baltimore police exhumed the body of Maskell, who had died of a major stroke in 2001, but did not find a DNA match for him at the crime scene. Which again, I don't think he was at the crime scene.
Right. This doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Police spokesperson Elise Armacost announced that this discovery does not exclude Maskell from being a suspect in the case, obviously. Over the years, there have been numerous bills put before the state of Maryland to extend the statute of limitation for child sex claims, and they have often been called a tax on the church.
That is okay. Go ahead and admit it then.
Right? It doesn't make sense to me. Literally, the Catholic Church sends lawyers to fight these bills, and they're just saying extend the statute of limitations on child sex abuse. That's all they're asking for.
That is just like as close to an admission of guilt as you can get.
Yeah, and these bills fail every single time.
Fucked up.
Of course. That's, oh my God.
In February of 2023, a Baltimore judge agreed to release a redacted report that will catalog over 80 years of sexual abuse by 158 priests and other church officials affiliated with the Archdiocese of Baltimore.
That's fucking insane.
Okay, that's awesome, but how much of that is being redacted? Like,
we don't know yet. This report is reportedly going to be over 450 pages long. Jesus. And list over 600 victims, possibly hundreds more.
Jesus.
Wow.
And obviously the church is fighting this.
I don't know how
Disgusting.
they can.
Disgusting.
And that is the end of this crazy case, because right now there's nothing more to tell. We're waiting for this to be released. we're no closer to knowing who killed either Joyce Malecki or Catherine Cesnik. Although with Catherine, we at least have a much better idea.
Ugh, just awful. What a rough. That was a rough one today.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. We're here to discuss all the awful shit. But man, that was
Yeah, this is a brutal case. And
yeah
like I said, that documentary is 7 episodes long, and it's a long watch, but it was the first time I went through it, I was floored. And then
yeah
it was last episode, I think. Yeah, it was last episode you and I touched on it, and you were like, I sense a murder coming, and I was like, you know what, this is the one I'm going to do next time. So
yep.
yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks as always.
Right. Yeah, this episode upsets me a lot, and I go back to this a lot. Like, we need to be better as a society, you know. Like,
Yeah,
and the church needs to do better about protecting people instead of their own predators.
for real. Yeah, it's just power protecting power, and
Well, it's like quoting Star Wars. I think Palpatine says to Anakin, "What do those in power do? They fear losing their power." You know.
true.
Yeah, that's a very fitting quote.
Yeah, and it's true because they don't, like, the church. They're powerful. They have money. They can't. I mean, I'm sure it costs a lot of money to run their industry, whatever it might be. So they have to keep that coming in, and the more bad press they get. But if they had done the right thing early on, then they probably would have won more public support.
Yeah, and there less bad things would have happened, so it would have been
Yeah,
less bad to report. Yeah.
it's crazy. It really is. So yeah, that's the case of Catherine Cesnik and Joyce Malecki. Final thoughts?
Rest in peace.
Yeah, agreed.
The corruption and the denial from the church and trying to sweep this away like it's nothing is absolutely nauseating.
Yeah.
I could understand not believing one or two people, but when you have 100, even if it's only the 40 to 50 that was first said, like, once you have that many people speaking up, you have to take action.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like we're talking about, the manager of a Costco. We're talking the fucking church.
Yeah. Yeah.
They put
Who has power
themselves.
over lots of children. It's just so fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, they put themselves in the position of quote, literally, they're supposed to shepherd the community,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they failed the community. At least the archdiocese in
Completely.
Baltimore. Yeah, crazy. So to all of our listeners, I apologize at how upsetting this one is. You can blame me if you need to. Let us know your thoughts on our Instagram. And of course, you can always email us at unsungmurderballads@outlook.com. We'd love to hear from you with your case suggestions and your thoughts on all of this. And we will be posting some images on our Instagram when this airs. So yeah, we look forward to hearing from you guys.
So, along with Janus's comments, it upsets us just as much as it upsets you guys. So, while it may be heavy topics and a lot to deal with, we're in this all together, and we're going to uncover all these kinds of things and go through it, as a team almost.
Yeah, I have to say, typing this all up in preparation for this really helps me internalize a lot of it. I get very upset during some of this stuff. It's brutal.
Yeah, that's extremely emotionally taxing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, I don't necessarily talk about the details for gratuitous purposes. I do it because I feel we owe it to the victims to relive it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, so thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
I'm Joyous dead.
And we'll see you next week. Bye.